What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Prison Break Raw. I'm your host, the one and only Big JD. Go ahead, get this channel, subscribe, share, at least some messages or comments, hit the thumbs up for the like, notification bell to be informed on all episodes when they drop. Another request coming out of social media, this time from Facebook. Somebody wanted to know, how is it that the Texas Syndicate got started in California? Is this true? Did it really happen? And how is it that they transitioned from the California system over into Texas? We're going to get into all the stuff you won't hear on social media without exposing any real details that are sensitive, but we will talk about the basic history of how this all transpired, why it took place, and how it's still very active. The Syndicate, Texas Syndicate, is still very active in California in a lot of ways. This I know for a fact. So, the Texas Syndicate, why was it started? Why was it called the Texas Syndicate if it was started in California? And how did it make its way back into the TDC? Well, it's quite simple if you really think about it and if you really understand the history of a lot of the mass movements that were occurring in the 60s, especially with Cesar Chavez dealing with farm workers. There was a lot of organized farm labor that was going on at that time, and the big boom that was happening and the good pay that was coming down the line with it brought a lot of what's called Tejanos out of Texas. Tejanos are people that are originally from Texas of Mexican descent. They've been there. They were considered to be the Spanish pioneers that established the state of Texas long before it became part of the United States. Tejanos. So, a lot of Tejanos had migrated into the Central Valley, into what's called the Salad Bowl, or the grapevine of California agriculture. And they did a lot of farming there. And when they got there, it wasn't a warm welcome from the people who were there. Mostly Tejanos, mostly Mexican immigrants that had migrated up from Mexico and were working in these fields at the time, saw a lot of these Tejanos as an invasion. And a lot of people may disagree, but this is what you won't hear on record. They seen a lot of them as an invasion. Now follow me as I say that. You'll understand why I mean that in a later episode, dealing with work and labor and people believing that you're stepping on their toes. So a lot of the people that already had established roots in the California Central Valley, in the Salad Bowl, and a lot of the agriculture, the farming, had believed that it was their thing. So imagine that all of these Tejanos are migrating there and working. It makes competing for a job a lot more intense. And they weren't welcomed with open arms, as I said. They were considered to be, in a lot of cases, invaders, foreigners, whatnot. People didn't like them. There was a lot of conflict. And a lot of the kids of these families that had moved there to work in these fields had started to establish their own gangs and their own cliques and whatnot. When they got into the California prison system, of course, they were preyed upon by other notable organizations, namely the Nuestra Familia. Now, a lot of people in social media or in Wikipedia or whatnot places will say that they started to protect themselves against the Aryan Brotherhood. Just another one of those blame all things European type of bullshit that you'll hear later on. But they had nothing to do with the Aryan Brotherhood. Very little, if anything at all. It was more Nuestra Familia and other gangs that were operating within the Hispanic community inside the California Department of Corrections. They established what's called a vanguard to protect themselves from predatory behavior from other people that were in the system. The Texas Syndicate was formed in Folsom Prison and also was established in San Quentin in the 1970s. And in the beginning, they had allied themselves with a lot of members of like Maravilla and other gangs that were resisting the power struggle that was going on between the two main organizations, Laime and Nuestra Familia. So the struggle was real between the two, and these groups were caught up in the middle. People that didn't want to be involved in it, people didn't want to play ball, didn't want to submit to either side. We're stuck in the middle, and the Tejanos that were in the California prison system were one of those groups that were just stuck in the middle. So they established their own thing, the Texas Syndicate. It wasn't very big, nonetheless. It's been proven throughout history, in California prison history, that you don't need a lot of numbers to actually be strong. And a lot of these dudes fought hard and fought like warriors in order to defend themselves, and they had each other's backs. Fast forwarded as the years went by, some of these members had actually returned back to their native Texas, went into the Texas Department of Corrections, or Department of Criminal Justice, it's called TDCJ, and established a Texas Syndicate inside the TDC itself. The TDC, or the establishment in the TDC by the Texas Syndicate, actually, if you listen to, again, social media sites, they'll tell you that it was all predominantly Mexican, and then they allied themselves with Mexican immigrant gangs and organizations inside the TDC. Actually, one of the founding members that was in the TDC branch of the Texas Syndicate was a white dude. Much like Joe Morgan in the MA, he was well established in this organization, and he helped orchestrate it and develop it and make it stronger. And in that system, it was more against what were now called the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas and Aryan Circles, Dirty White Boys, and stuff like that. But the Texas Syndicate has a lot of loose alliances with a lot of different organizations that are outside the typical what's called Hispanic main population, as you'll know just by word of mouth and talking to some people that actually been there. So the Texas Syndicate started as a means to protect themselves from other organizations, namely the ones that I just basically mentioned to you, and they've been active in the California Department of Corrections ever since. There's still a couple of members that are in there. I actually had met one once upon a time, but he didn't last long. He got whacked. This was in Chino, and it was a pretty bloody ordeal for this individual right here. We're not going to talk about his name or the circumstances of it, but he thought it was all good. He thought he was cool there, but he was not. Now, what a lot of people don't know about the Texas Syndicate in California is that it has strong ties to California, and it didn't only basically entail people that were Tejanos. There were actually people that were California natives that helped make the Texas Syndicate what it was inside of California. And there's also a base where members of Texas Syndicate are still active inside the state of California. Don't really know where that's at or who's doing it, but they're there, and I know this firsthand that they are actually there. So in the TDC, the Texas Syndicate basically became one of the most dominant groups in the system itself. And as time went on, just like California, because what a lot of people don't understand is in a lot of ways, Texas and California are very intertwined in a lot of beliefs and a lot of ideas. The culture is much different. Nevertheless, when it comes to the struggle of common people that are in the prison systems, gangs of both states are very closely tied in a lot of ways and have their origins all from the same sources in many cases. So what a lot of people don't know also is that because they're so tightly wound together, that in certain circumstances, Texas convicts in the federal prison system actually have alliances with members of California organizations on both sides, on the Sureño side and on the Norteño side. On the Norteño side, which is strange because the Texas Syndicate started as a means to protect themselves against mostly Norteños, or before there was Norteños really, but people from Northern California are now allied with Norteños or have a loose alliance with them inside the federal prison system, mainly at places like Oakdale. Also, I believe they're in La Tuna, El Reno, Allenwood, places like that. This is where they're together with them. And on the opposite side of that, you have what's called Huesos or Tango Blast. And Huesos and Tango Blast got a pretty loose alliance with Sureños in the California or in the federal prison system. And the funny thing about the Tango Blast is this is what I heard, but I don't really know if it's true, so I'm not going to state it as fact right here. But the dude that actually had established and started the Tango Blast was kind of like on the lines of a dropout member of the Texas Syndicate. Don't know how true that is, but if that's the case, then it shows you quite a bit of similarities between the California mindset and the Texas mindset, as far as like California has the 2-5 and Texas would have what was called Thongo Blast, but they're not viewed in the same negative light as 2-5ers. But from what I've heard and a lot of sources that I got information from inside the BOP is that it's pretty much the same situation as how the two organizations started inside these two very different prison systems. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Texas Syndicate started in California. Why is it called the Texas Syndicate? Is because these were Tejanos that formed an alliance together, a band of brothers, in order to protect themselves from predatory behavior from, namely, California natives in the California Department of Corrections. Now it's become something where it's more mainstream Texas. You don't really hear about it at all in California, but nevertheless, their footprint is still there and will always be there because that's where they started. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, how the Texas Syndicate started in California, what their struggle was, what the beef was, and how they have become one of the most dominant figures inside the TDC now, from a small band of people inside the California Department of Corrections that had transitioned back into their native state of Texas. You heard it right here. That's what it is. Didn't have to expose any game really to tell you that story either. So go ahead, leave your comments if you got any kind of follow-up information about this or you want to hear anything more about it. Go ahead, leave a comment about it. If you know more than I do about that, go ahead, leave a comment about it. But this is what I've been told. This is what I had learned a very long time ago. And I've yet to see anything else that says that it's any different than how I just explained it to you. Prison Break Raw, uncut, uncensored, no holds barred, not sugarcoat, not politically correct, all up in your face, slapping you with that dick of reality, and I'm out.